Good evening, and welcome to another edition of Making the Case. I'm very pleased that you can join me this evening, and I'm very happy to be back here with you for another Wednesday night program. As is customary, those of you who are watching on Facebook, please help me to share this live program and allow me to welcome all of you on Facebook, as well as those who are joining me on television and on Freedom Radio. Welcome to all of you Guyanese across our country. I want to begin tonight, first of all, by expressing publicly my condolences to the families who suffered the tragedy of the Madia fire last Sunday, 2 Sundays ago, that is. It has been a very, very difficult week or so for our country. The atmosphere has been very solemn, and of course Guyanese all across our country have been united in our support for the families of the victims. We have now lost 20 young, beautiful, precious lives, and it is a tremendously sad thing and a horrific experience for our country and for those families. From then to now, the families have the continued support of His Excellency President Ali and the entire cabinet. We have been assigned families directly for which we have taken responsibility for, and those families are now our families. And this arrangement is not a short-term one, as was explained by the President. This will be a long-term support mechanism that we will continue to provide for the families of those who lost their lives. I must say that I witnessed firsthand the suffering of these families because I've been spending a lot of time with them, and it saddens me deeply to see how much they are suffering, but at the same time, how strong these families are, especially the women, the mothers, who have other children, and while they are grieving the loss of one child, they still have to maintain their sanity, and they have to keep their emotions under control for the sake of their other children. So it's extremely difficult for those parents, the families, and the relatives of those who've lost their lives. And similarly, it is difficult for many of the survivors, many of the young girls who were in the dorm, but who were fortunate to come out alive from the fire. So my heart and the heart of Guyanese across the country goes out to those families. Some of the victims have already been buried, but tomorrow we will have the largest burial, which is in Maikobi, where 11 of those young girls will be laid to rest. So tomorrow will be a very, very difficult day emotionally for everyone who will be there and for our country. And I ask that those of you who are following and who may take to social media, I ask that your comments be respectful, reverent, and full of love and support for the families during this very difficult time. What is most unfortunate as well is what we saw the opposition doing during this very unfortunate and very difficult period in our country's history. And that is trying to capitalize on a very catastrophic event that has claimed the lives of so many young people, and using it to try to further divide our country. We saw a lot of comments on social media as well from people that were insensitive to the families. But I would say overwhelmingly, most people showed their solidarity. They expressed love, support, and offered prayers for the families of those children who we lost, and the families and the survivors of those who came out of the dorm alive. That fire should have never happened, but for the malicious act of one individual, and we have seen that the law has taken its course, and the young woman who started that fire has been charged with 19 murder charges. So I am fully confident that she will face the brunt of the law for her actions. And the law will take its course because the families do deserve justice. Now, just as a matter of announcement, we saw just this evening, it was announced that the Because We Care cash grant will be distributed from next Monday. I think that is the 5th of June. June 5th, from Monday, the distribution will commence across the country for the Because We Care cash grant. And the cash grant now stands at $40,000 per child across the country. So whether your children are enrolled in public school or private school, they are eligible to receive the cash grant. You would recall that previously only public school children were deemed eligible for the cash grant, but we subsequently allowed the grant to be issued to school children who are enrolled in private schools. And that was as a result of consultation with the parents of kids who are going to private school, and we recognize that if their parents are supporting them financially to send them to a private school, then that responsibility is taken off of the government. So they are relieving us of that responsibility, and we also heard them that all the school children should be eligible once they are enrolled, and we agreed with their position, and so we were able to have a change in policy. We embraced that, and through those consultations we were able to extend the grant to our private school children, so that every child in Guyana who is enrolled in a school is now eligible to receive the grant. So it's not one grant per family, but each child receives the cash grant. So if you have 4 children, then each one of them will receive $40,000. And this is one of the commitments that is very important to our government and very important to the Ministry of Education as well, because of its colored history, and that is that it was introduced by the People's Progressive Party Civic prior to 2015, and then it was subsequently disbanded or discontinued after the 2015 elections and the APNU-AFC coalition took office. Now, I know that the opposition and the PPPC differ on many, many things. But a support, a grant to school children is not something that I would have ever considered contentious or controversial. And when we saw in 2015 that this cash grant was discontinued under the APNU AFC, it was very shocking and it was very hard to digest for parents because it became purely political. So something that should have been benefiting our children and that should have been growing incrementally from 2015 to now, or before 2015 when we introduced it, something that should have been increasing and growing incrementally was discontinued under the previous administration, under the Granger-led administration. And they couldn't offer any valid reason why they are discontinuing it, except to say that they couldn't afford it. And we know that that is not true, that they could have afforded many other things that were not considered a necessity. We know that they increased food in government, for example, to the amount that it would have costed them to issue each child $10,000 as it was at that time. But they said it was not fiscally responsible. And so they discontinued it. And so our school children were pawns in their political game. And the school children ultimately suffered because of their decision not to continue this cash grant. We said that we would reinstate it and that we would increase it to $50,000 before 2025. We are in 2023. We have restored it and it has been increased to $40,000 already. So I believe that all parents and all of our school children across the country can be secure in knowing that our promise was restored and that we are well on our way to reaching our target of $50,000 per child. Now, we are also in the middle of the campaign for local government elections. And, you know, when you look over at the PNC, APNU camp, I'm not sure what they're calling themselves these days. And that is the first problem that people should have when you're thinking about supporting a party. I mean, if you cannot even remember which acronym is being used this time around and how you must refer to your party this time around, then something is definitely wrong. Because they keep shedding their skin all the time. They keep introducing new acronyms, and one time they're APNU, then they're APNU plus AFC coalition, and then the AFC dropped off from the general to the local elections, and now they're APNU again, or PNC, because I'm not sure which parties make up the APNU coalition on their own after the AFC has chosen very wisely, I must say, not to contest these local government elections. So they are playing it safe. They rather sit behind a camera and they rather just talk about the government, bash the government, and talk about promises and plans that they will never implement because people are not going to support them in the future. So many people in our country have been betrayed by the AFC because of the promises that they made to people prior to the 2015 elections. They made a lot of promises to people, and they convinced a lot of people to support them, that they had a plan for rice and they had a plan for the entire country. And then we saw very swiftly that they broke all of those promises and that they joined with the APNU in administering a lot of destructive policies in our country. And people suffered tremendously during the 2015 to 2020 period. And it is painful, but sometimes we have to go back there. And sometimes we have to examine our own circumstances during those 5 years. I know that now that we are out of that period and that Guyana being in a position where it is now, it is easy for us to be comfortable now and to forget what it felt like during the 2015 to 2020 period under the leadership of the then President Granger. But I remember distinctly, because I was, like many other Guyanese, affected by the bad policies of the then administration. I come from a private sector background, and I can tell you firsthand, I can go into details about how my business suffered during those 5 years. And we sometimes see testimonies on Facebook from young business people who spoke about having to close their shops, close their stores, who had to take a second mortgage on their property and on their homes just to be able to pay their bills because the economy was in such a bad state. And all of their policies were very, very destructive to business and to the investment climate in our country. That is not something that we talk often a lot too, but many, many people experience that, especially people from the private sector. Because you would recall as well that the APNU AFC had a very bad relationship with the private sector during those 5 years, and they antagonized the private sector, as a matter of fact, because they said that the private sector were friends of the PPP. Now, we have said very publicly, and we've said over and over again, that the private sector are our partners in development. Government alone cannot create employment and provide employment for all of the people in our country. But if we can develop an investment climate which would allow Guyanese, big business people, medium scale business people, small business people, if we can allow them the opportunity to invest their money, then they will do well, their businesses will grow, and they will employ people. And that is how you add to the employment pool, by empowering people to create employment and to create jobs. Of course, government will create its own jobs and will hire people to execute our mandate in government, to implement our programs. We'll hire specialists, we'll hire attorneys, we'll hire public servants. And as much as we need to implement our programs, but we need partners in development. We need our stakeholders on board. For example, if you look at the housing program, we are, through the government, offering house lots, which is another manifesto commitment that we made, 50,000 house lots in 5 years. And we are well on our way to achieving that. We are close to the halfway mark in terms of house lot allocation. But we have taken on an additional responsibility, something that we didn't promise in our manifesto. But we have taken on this Herculean task of trying to construct as many houses as possible so that people can not only receive their land, but also move very swiftly from the land allocation program into a fully constructed home or a turnkey home. The government or the Ministry of Housing cannot build those houses ourselves. We need our private sector partners to be able to do that. We need our private sector partners, our contractors and so on, to implement our infrastructure program, to build the roads, to build the bridges, the culverts, the drainage works, to install electricity and water in all of our housing schemes so that our allottees can move into service lots. So this is the type of partnership that is necessary in government, and this is just one example of how important the private sector is to ministries and to different sectors in government, so that we can roll out our promises and deliver on our manifesto commitments to the people of our country. And it's not just for us to be able to say that we have delivered this, but we know and we understand, the People's Progressive Party Civic understands the importance of the Ministry of Housing and Water and providing affordable housing to our people. We understand that it is important to the enhancement of the lives of our people. We understand the impact that home ownership has on empowering people, especially women, helping them to obtain financial freedom. We understand and we appreciate the security that it brings to families. And we understand and appreciate that it is a very big part of our economy. It's a very important pillar in our economy because it helps to drive the construction sector. So all of these things are part of a comprehensive policy that we have in government in order to achieve all of our programs, policies, projects, and promises that we made to the people of our country. So we have to go back to those years. And when I say we, I don't mean the politicians or the PPP. We, you and me, all of us, Guyanese, have to sit down, even though we may be in a position now where we are comfortable and we are pleased with the path that our country is on. It is important for us to look back at that period and to recall how difficult it was. Those who are home now, who are now employed, for example, but who were unemployed during that period, who either lost their jobs during that period or started to look for employment during that period and never found it, but you are working now and you are comfortable now. You have to remember what it was like when you didn't have a job during those years. You have to remember what it was like when you didn't have the amount of opportunities that are available now that the PPP is back in office. The housing program, for example, the scholarship program that you can take advantage of, the small business grants that are distributed through the Small Business Bureau to help young people and to help young entrepreneurs start their own business. So we're not just focusing on big businesses or medium-sized businesses, but even our small business owners, empowering our small business owners to be able to realize their dreams of becoming a business owner and growing their own businesses. So we have to go there, and we have to go there often, because we have to remind ourselves of the better place that we are in now, and we have to appreciate the journey of what took place during that time and where we have come now. And we have to analyze very critically what the issues and challenges were during that time, and the non-responsiveness of the President Granger, the former president, and his ministers who were absent. Granger was an absentee president. He provided no leadership to the cabinet during those years. and you had cabinet members who had no direction, who had no vision, who had no plan or program, and everyone was running in different directions. Everyone steering their own ship, everyone helping themselves, and not looking out for the best interests of our country or our people. The PNC, APNU, AFC did not care about ordinary people during that period. You recall the elitism that took place during that period. You couldn't talk to them. They were not accessible. They were not on the ground. They didn't make themselves available to the people of our country. They didn't hold press conferences. They didn't have community meetings. You couldn't meet any of them and talk to them and share your views or share your challenges or issues and have them sort out anything for you. We have to remember those things, and you have to do a comparison, as I always do when I'm on this program, because it's important. When you have decisions to make, and I say this constantly, when you have decisions to make, you do so in your mind, and you in deciding what to do or what decision to make, you make comparisons. You think about the pros and cons. You think about the what ifs. You think about what is unknown and what is known. You think about risk. And if you think like that and you critically analyze the two periods, the period with the PPP in office and the period when the APNU AFC coalition were in government, and if you were to think objectively and critically about the state of our country and the direction of our country and our economy during that period versus this period, the choice becomes very, very clear. The choice becomes crystal clear that the party to lead this country and our people to prosperity is the People's Progressive Party Civic. So I take this opportunity once again on this Wednesday evening to urge you to do that. And I'm not here to influence your thinking or your decision by playing on your emotions or by using race or divisive language to try to compel you to support the party that I support or to support the government. I'm using facts. I'm presenting scenarios that you know existed during that period versus what obtains now. And I'm asking you to do your own introspection, to do your own research, and even to look back on your own lives and your own experiences during that period versus this period. And you yourselves will come to your own decision, make your own decision as to which party has the experience, the plan, and can provide the leadership for this country at this very critical time in our nation's history. So today we also saw another ruling delivered by the Chief Justice Roxanne George. We saw, as a matter of fact, in less than 3 days, in less than 72 hours, we saw the Chief Justice deliver 2 judgments against the APNU. As a matter of fact, she dismissed both cases brought by the PNC APNU Chief Scrutineer, Carol Joseph. She dismissed both of those cases, threw them out because they lacked merit. And she said, as a matter of fact, on the ruling against the list challenge. So there were 2 cases going on, both brought by the APNU. The first one is the challenge that the PNC made against the demarcation of boundaries, and they said that the Minister of Local Government violated the laws of our country when he demarcated the boundaries that are governing the local authority areas. So that was the first case. And the second one is a challenge that they made against the list. And the contention was that the official list of electors could not be used to compile the voters' lists for the upcoming local government elections. So there were two challenges, one against the demarcation of boundaries and one challenge against the list. Chief Justice Roxanne George dismissed both of those cases. She threw them out. And as a matter of fact, she described the one that was challenging the list, she described it as unmeritorious, much ado about nothing, and consuming valuable judicial time. And this reminds me very much of the series of court cases that were brought both before the 2020 elections and post the March 2nd, 2020 elections, all of which were unmeritorious. They lacked merit, and all of it was a colossal waste of time. Those that were brought between the period 2018 to 2020 up to the time that President Ali was sworn in was just to delay the official declaration of the results. And we see today that that pattern continues, and that abuse of our court system and our judiciary continues even today. So the thing they're trying to block now is the holding of local government elections. And we've been saying this all along. We've been saying that the PNC does not want to have local government elections held in this country. They are mortally afraid of going to an election because the leader of the opposition, Aubrey Norton, is incapable of leading anything and incapable of gaining support. So we already know that they lost a lot of support after 2020. They lost a lot of support, of course, going into the elections, and that's why the PPP were able to defeat them convincingly at the 2020 elections. But even people who still voted for them on the 2nd of March 2020 will not vote for them this time around, because what people saw in the 5 months that ensued after March the 2nd, no supporter who has a conscience or who is decent and law-abiding will support a party that is undemocratic. And we saw during those 5 months a lot of people who supported the APNU say that they will never vote for them again, because even though they were willing to give them another opportunity in government, they are not willing to vote for undemocratic practices. And many people who voted for them called on them during those 5 months and said, look, we voted for you, but if you lost the elections, you have to resign. You have to come out of government. You have to facilitate a peaceful transition of power to the PPP. Many people across our country said that during that period and did so publicly. So they've lost their support as well. Tens of thousands of people who supported them even in 2020 will not support them this time around, because now they have seen for themselves what we've been saying all along, that the PNC is inherently undemocratic. It's in their DNA. They don't understand democracy. They don't believe in democracy. They believe in acquiring power by whatever means possible. And once they acquire power, they are going to hold on to that power by whatever means possible. And we saw every trick in the book being used in 2020, no matter how ridiculous the approach was, no matter how laughable it was, how comical it was. Of course, when we look back at it now, it's shocking and surprising that people said some of the things that they said during that time. But back then, it wasn't a laughing matter, because a lot of people were distraught, depressed, and confused as to what was really taking place. People know that elections are a simple matter. It is the party that has the most votes that is declared the winner of the elections. And then we saw elections become a very complicated and complex issue. And we saw people going to court and filing cases on very frivolous grounds and wasting the court's time and using up a lot of time, buying time, until they can figure out their next move, or until to delay the elections for as long as possible. So in terms of the demarcation of the boundaries case, like I said, the Chief Justice threw out that challenge posed by the APNU, and the Minister of Local Government, Minister Nigel Darmlal, was very clear that he merely resorted to the boundaries that were there prior to 2018. When the PNC, when the APNU AFC changed it. So those boundaries were there initially since the 90s. And in 2018, we saw the APNU change many of the boundaries. They adjusted a lot of the boundaries, so they created new boundaries. They collapsed and they merged NDCs, and they created new ones in 2018. So they were the ones that dislodged those initial boundaries that were there from since the 90s. And what the Minister of Local Government merely did was resorted to what was the situation in 2016 and prior from in the 90s. And the Chief Justice upheld that and said that the minister followed the law, there was no violation of the law, and that the case was without merit. So we have seen as well that the PNC has started to shift now their narrative. So of course race is still a very big part of their agenda. So ensuring that they spew lies and hate through whisper campaigns and through many of the communities that they go into, even though that is still very much a prevalent part of their campaign strategy. The other part is talking about corruption. And this is something that they did prior to 2015 as well. And it resonated with young people a lot, because young people did not have the opportunity to experience what it is like under the leadership of the PNC. Of course, they would have heard their parents and grandparents talk about the state of our country under the PNC-led years, the 28 years when they were in office, but they didn't have an opportunity to experience the PNC themselves. And so they campaigned a lot on young people, asking young people to give them a chance, and they did a good job at convincing people that the PPP is corrupt. And they spoke a lot about corruption, and that kind of resonated with people. Lack of accountability, lack of transparency, But we saw that once they came into office, that all of those things that they said they would do, they talked about who they were going to lock up and who they were going to imprison and which fraud and which corruption that they will expose. And we saw none of that once they took office. Nobody went to jail. They couldn't prove anything. All of the cases that they brought against former ministers and public servants prior to 2015, they were all dismissed. They were all without merit. And they just paraded people in the court for the show of it and to gain political points. What we see now, the same pattern of corruption during the 2015 to 2020 era, now on a smaller scale, of course, because you have now Aubrey Norton, even within his own party, the lack of accountability that we see there. And we recall the blank check saga, having the treasurer to the party, the PNC, signing blank checks. And so they will not change their ways. We saw during the 2015-2020 period that the PNC was the most corrupt. The APNU AFC was the most corrupt government in the history of our country. And we provided evidence of that corruption. And we have given that evidence to the Attorney General, and of course a lot of the former ministers and people in government, the coalition ministers, are facing charges. And we know the evidence of their corruption. We've seen it in the Auditor General's reports that we are going through year by year during the 2015 to 2020 period, and we see very clearly how potent the corruption was during that period. So they talked a good talk in 2015, in the lead up to the elections of 2015. But we saw quickly once they took office, the first thing they did, of course, was break all of the promises that they made to our country. Their first 100-day plan still remains unfulfilled. So not even that they could have implemented. And these people have a serious problem with implementation. And I witnessed that when we took office in 2020. Even if they have a good idea, for example, and they may have started something, they are unable to finish it. They were unable to implement anything substantial. I don't know if it's their lack of attention or lack of interest, maybe it's their incompetence, but they were not able during those 5 years to implement anything. So even if they had a good program or a good project, they were incapable and incompetent to implement the program or project. So in addition to having to deal with people who are corrupt, you also have to deal with people who are just plain and simple incompetent. And so even if they come to tell you now that they've changed their ways and that they're no longer corrupt, I'm pretty sure they still remain incompetent. So I don't know what would have changed from 2020 to now that they would have gained some competence. A lot of the ministers, in my view, under the coalition government, wasted the resources of the government when they took scholarships for themselves because it didn't help them at all. So many of them who studied and said they got degrees through a government-sponsored scholarship, it didn't help them at all, because when I listen to them in the parliament now, sometimes I wonder how it is that these people are able to occupy seats in a legislature. How are they able to become members of parliament and legislators in our country responsible for the passage of laws that will govern our country? And I'm always appalled by the lack of substance in the debates of the National Assembly. So the scholarships did nothing to help some of them. And looking at the state, of course, as we were talking earlier about how people suffered under the APNU during those years, 2015, 2020, and how uncaring their policies were. And that is another characteristic of how they governed when they were in office, in a very uncaring manner. And we saw that first and foremost with what they did within the first 6 months of being in government, rewarding themselves with a salary increase of 50 to 100% in some cases. That was an uncaring thing to do. When you have public servants who deserve it more than you do and who are looking forward to increases in their own salaries, the APNU AFC ministers took it for themselves and substantially increased their own salaries versus what they gave to public servants. That was a very uncaring thing to do. It was a very insensitive thing to do, and it hurt a lot of people in our country. Then when you look at the tax system that was implemented during that period, they believe in earning revenue in government through taxation. So they are a group of people, many of whom are still around, many of whom are still coming to you and asking you for your vote. Many of them are still very active in their party, in the PNC, in the APNU, and in the AFC. So they have the same conviction now as they did then. So they implemented over 200 taxes, many of it placed on basic food items that made it very difficult for people to afford. So the cost of living was a big factor during that period. That was another uncaring thing to do. They removed the water and electricity subsidy. Another uncaring and insensitive thing to do. And they're talking a lot now, and I hear Norton talking a lot about people-centered policy. I don't know since when the PNC knows about people-centered policies or is even associated remotely with any people-centered policies, because when you look at their track record, when you look at what they actually did in government, none of it was people-centered. It was selfishly centered around themselves. So that was their interest. Their interest was in themselves and ensuring that they can grab as much as possible during the period that they were in office. They spent over $1 trillion in government, more than the PPP did in 23 years in government. The PPP spent 23 years in government and spent less than $1 trillion. The PNC went into government for 5 years and spent over $1 trillion, and we have nothing to show for it during that period. It was all consumption based. It was all spent on paying wages and salaries. It was spent on splurging in government, buying vehicles, looking after themselves, paying for scholarships for themselves, paying for health care for themselves. The ministers had a special health care program where they went to Ireland when they needed medical attention. So they did nothing to improve the healthcare sector. They didn't build any new hospitals. They didn't improve the health centers across the country, but they gave themselves a medical insurance plan that would allow them to go to Ireland for medical treatment whenever they needed to do so. So this thing about people-centered policies now or people-centered programs that Aubrey Norton is talking about is pure lies. It's pure nonsense. So that is why we have to dissect every single thing that they are saying. It may sound good, but you have to dissect it and really examine it. What does this mean? What are the people-centered programs that you are going to implement? And if you are going to implement, you say you're going to implement it now, why didn't you implement it before? And there existed policies there before because we left a lot of these things in government. We left the cash grant. We left the subsidy for the water and electricity subsidy for the pensioners. They removed it. They took away the cash grant. They removed the subsidies. They imposed 200 hardship taxes on basic food items. They made people's lives hard. They put VAT on education one time. For 1 year, they implemented that until they came under heavy criticism and protests week after week. Then they reversed that policies because it was one of the stupidest policies that anybody can ever imagine. Up to this day, it boggles my mind why anybody would put a tax on education when they should be making education more affordable. They made it more expensive for people. And they talk about people-centered policies. So I see Kevin already indicated to me, did he say 5 minutes or 1 minute? The time flies out so quickly, you know, when I'm on the program. But just to say as well, just to reassure people and to comfort people that in addition to all of the policies and the programs that we were just going through and the track record of the PNC during that period, we also need to reassure people that the People's Progressive Party Civic always adheres to the Constitution and the rule of law. And we will always be defenders of democracy. And so in addition to having the right economic policies, in addition to creating jobs, improving our healthcare sector, or delivering quality education, clean water, housing, and all of these things, it is overwhelmingly important that the party that you choose is also one that is compliant to our Constitution. And that you must know that the PPP would fight to defend your right to vote and to select a party and a president of your choice. And you have an opportunity on June the 12th this year to select local representatives of your choice. Representatives who have our blessing, those who are running on our slate, and whom we will give all of the support and the backing that they need to implement the promises that they are making in your communities. So please, it is extremely important for you to come out on the 12th of June. It is important for you to use your vote because your vote is your voice, and it's very important for you to make that choice and to know that when you support a People's Progressive Party Civic candidate, you are supporting the PPPC and you are supporting a party with a track record and a party that you can trust, a party that keeps its promises. And we will ensure that all of our candidates govern and lead in the same way that we have been doing over the last few years. So thank you very much, everyone. I'm completely out of time now. Thank you for joining me this evening, and I look forward to seeing you again, same place next week, same time as well. God bless you and be safe.